Okay. So the daily check-ins submitted before class, they're just going to be, 5 basic questions based on the reading. Also, when I grade them, I'm going to use grade very loosely, because if you give me any kind of reasonable answer, I'll give it a point. These are participation points, remember. These aren't your summative assessments. Now, that being said, I reserve the right, if we're talking about ancient Greece and you give me J.S. Bach as an answer, I reserve the right to not give credit for that one, because it tells me you probably didn't read the thing. But if I ask a question about ancient Greece and the answer is Plato, but you say Aristoxenus, then I'll give you credit for that. Bottom line, what I'm saying is, please give me something plausible so that I know you've actually digested the material to some extent. Everyone feel good about that? Fantastic. Okay, so that's the most regular part of grading. The other section that you'll hear about are the listening quizzes. So we'll have 4 listening quizzes during the semester. Each listening quiz will involve only the pieces listed on this syllabus. So I'll bring in other music to play during class, other snippets of things that give us insight, but you are only responsible for the pieces listed on the syllabus that are in your Oxford anthology. So those will be 4 regularly spaced classes. I'll talk more about the format of those later, but if you had Music History 2 with me, then you're already familiar with the format. Written assignments. So there are going to be 2 written assignments this time. The first one is what we call an insight project. And I actually adapted this from Dr. St. Pierre. She sent me her ideas on this as kind of assignment, and I really liked it. So what I'm going to do is basically ask you to do research without the paper. So I'm going to ask you to build a thesis based on research. And I'm going to ask you to look up things and find things on a topic that interests you. But you don't actually then have to go and write the full essay. Again, we'll talk more about that in a couple weeks, but that will be due around midterm time. And the other written assignment is a reading response project, where I will ask you to find an article that interests you and then respond to that article using other academic articles. Again, we'll talk more about that down the road. That'll be due during finals time. So those are the 2 written assignments. The other part of your grades will consist of the midterm and final exam. So we'll have 1 test that covers things we study in the first half of the semester, and another test that covers the semester. We'll talk more about the formats when we get closer to those exams. But does anyone have questions right now? Everyone feel good so far?
I had one question just for clarification.
Absolutely.
So you said that we would have the 5 questions before class time daily. Is that like there will be questions every single day before class, or is it just 5 questions before that one class?
Correct. 5 questions before each class. So just to make sure we're keeping up with the reading. I am not going to do them for this Wednesday, because I know some people might still be getting textbooks in. I don't want to cause undue stress the first week of class. So it'll start on Monday, the 23rd, this coming Monday.
Okay.
Are we going to be using the website? No, Perla. This time, because I got on the student reviews from last year, a lot of people said they didn't like the website. So rather than basing our modules on that on Music History site, we're going to use the Oxford this year. That will take the place of the website, which quite frankly, I actually like the Oxford more than the website myself, because it just has more information. Any other questions? Okay. As far as required materials go, I think I scrolled past that before. I apologize. Yeah, of course, it's right above grading. Okay, so the required materials are actually 3 separate books that are all interrelated. The first one is the Oxford History of Western Music. Now, there is a second edition out there, but the second edition is more expensive than this. So I am only requiring the first edition. If you want the second edition, you are free to get it. There might just be some small changes. I just don't believe in giving publishers an extra $500 because they changed 3 words. Nobody needs to do that. So if you want the second edition, feel free. I'm only requiring the first because it's significantly less expensive. Likewise with the anthologies, we're going to be using volumes 1 and 2 of the anthologies. Now, many of you may be saying, wait, I have to buy 3 books? No, and I totally get that. What you can do, I'm not fussy about giving publishers money. I don't care if they get money. They already have it. So what you can do is chip in with friends. I don't care if all 32 of you chip in on a single copy and take turns scanning it and sharing those scans. So that way you might only be paying a very small fraction of the cost, the more friends you can get in your circle. So I'm all for that, as long as you guys have access to these materials. Okay. Next thing that I wanted to address, right, is intellectual property. And what I mean by that is, please don't plagiarize. Plagiarizing takes many forms. It can be something as simple as sharing tests. Now, I get it. I'm not in the room with you guys. It's very easy just to share files, just to copy and paste your answers in a group chat. I understand. I don't want to use anti-plagiarism software on the tests because they have a tendency to be ableist and stress-inducing, just because they're not always that accurate. And I don't want to be ableist, and I don't want to cause extra stress. So I trust you. You're intelligent adults. I trust you not to cheat. I trust you not to share files. Likewise, on your written assignments, don't just Google things and copy and paste them into your essays. Please don't, because I will find it out. I care enough about what you submit to make sure that it's an actual submission. And I do that because I care about your intellectual progress. But please don't just copy and paste things. Also, plagiarism involves any time you take credit for another person's thoughts and ideas without citing them. So even if you change up a few words and you change words here and there, or you rearrange a sentence, that doesn't mean you haven't plagiarized. Even if you change a few words, if you are still taking that person's thoughts without citing them properly, you are plagiarizing. So please don't do that. To that end, I am here to coach you through the process of researching. I am here to help you incorporate other authors' thoughts without taking credit for them. So please, please don't hesitate to ask me if you ever have any doubts about what constitutes plagiarizing or whether and how to cite another author. Please just say so, because I love working on that with students. What I hate working on is the paperwork after I see someone plagiarize. Any questions on that? Okay, I feel good if you guys feel good. So, yes, the last subtle reminder I want to give you is that the calendar is at the end of the syllabus. Please do check that calendar to see what we're reading and talking about each day. If you have any questions at any time, just shoot me an email, because 10 to 1, if you guys have a question, other people in the class have that exact same question. So, everybody feel good before we start talking about some actual music. Yeah, okay, excellent. Then I can get rid of the bureaucracy and move on to the fun stuff. Fantastic. Okay, is everyone seeing the PowerPoint? Paula. Okay, we did the introductions. My computer was on the fritz then, so we didn't get to work on this fun slide. Great, let's talk about music in the ancient world. Like I said a few times already, it's so different from the way we conceive of music now. And so it's going to take us a little bit of translating to get into the head of the basis of all of Western music. So we find this basis in the writings of people like Plato and Aristotle. Notice I start out talking about philosophers rather than composers. Why? Because in the ancient Greek world, these philosophers were examining the key to all aspects of existence, including the arts. So these philosophers had thoughts on the way music should work, regardless of the nitty-gritty theory that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. So the first thing that we might want to know, the first idea we might want to get familiar with, is this idea of ethos. And the ancient Greeks, like Plato and Aristotle, would have defined ethos as the nature or disposition of something. In other words, what that thing is meant to do and how it's meant to do it. What is the nature of a thing or a person? That is its ethos. This idea of ethos reflected the entire visible and invisible universe and controlled human responses to everything. I respond to objects based on their ethos. People respond to me based on my ethos. We respond to everything based on the interaction of our ethoses, our natures. Does that make sense to everybody? And this is in the sense of ethical character. Notice ethos, ethics. So in a sense, this is driving ethics. Now, how does this relate to music? Well, different modes, and we'll talk about what those modes are shortly, but different musical modes had different effects on humans. So again, the ethos of the music has its effect on us based on our ethos. And music can change the way we interact with the world around us because its nature acts on our nature. Now, Plato and Aristotle were a bit fuddy-duddy-ish in the fact that they believe music was licentious and chaotic. It's more for pleasure than for thinking. It's good for arousing feeling, but it doesn't lead you to higher rational discourse. So they would believe things like the Lydian and Mixolydian modes are dirge-like. Anybody know what a dirge is? Kind of. Anyone throw out an idea on the dirge?
Is it like a funeral hymn or something?
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. So these two modes, Lydian and Mixolydian, are very like funereal and they're going to make me sad. Even if I don't naturally feel sad, their nature will make me sad. Ionian and some Lydian music makes me soft and relax, and it's going to make me give in to sloth, and I'm just going to be lazy and lay around all day because I heard something in the Ionian mode. If I hear something in the Dorian or Phrygian mode, I'm going to feel very warlike, and it's going to make me bellicose and violent. Even if I'm not naturally violent, the music's ethos will make me violent. So do we understand why Plato and Aristotle were cautious about music?
Seems to provoke the 7 deadly sins.
Exactly. I mean, they wouldn't have put it as 7 deadly sins, but yeah, basically. The different modes that you were listening to would make you give in to these different, bestial instincts, because the ethos of the music is just too strong for humans to resist. Everyone with me on that? So there are different genres of music in the ancient world. And I'll just, talk a little bit about what the purpose of each genre was for. So we've got hymns, laments, paeans, and dithyrambs. Each of them have their own distinctive melody types, which means if they've got their own distinctive melody types, they've probably got their own corresponding modes to go with them. So if each mode has an effect on humanity, then each of these musical genres would also have a corresponding effect on humanity. So a hymn being something sacred, maybe I'm going to use my Ionian mode so that it's very soft. If I've got a lament, then I'm probably going to use my Lydian or Mixolydian because it's dirge-like. If I've got paeans, then I might want something Dorian and Phrygian because I should have military fanfare, triumph, like, yes, we're excited. I want that Dorian energy. And a dithyramb would be like pure poetry. So again, I might go for my Ionian, my sloth mode. But in any case, the important thing, more than the individual genres, what I want you to reflect on is that this philosophy of equating genres with lawlessness means that these philosophers wished society could go back to having musical authorities who would be able to control the population. Music as a form of controlling thought, which leads us to the ultimate Greek belief in music, that music could be and should be at its best an educational tool versus just for your listening pleasure. These philosophers were very anti the indulgence of just sitting there and listening to music. They thought music could control the mind. That sounds very ominous. I don't mean it to be that ominous. They thought music could influence our being, let's put it that way. And in their opinion, music's highest purpose would be training the mind to think of higher and better and more complicated things. So that's Plato and Aristotle. Everybody with me there? Let's bring in the theory side, as I said I would. And this is where Pythagoras comes in. So if we're going to study ancient Greek music theory, we should be very cognizant of the fact that numbers were the basis of the entire ancient world. They believed every discipline could be boiled down to and explained by math and the numerical relationships between objects and people, which is why Pythagoras's music theory, which is really the basis of our music theory that we still use, is entirely based on ratios. He's using numerical ratios of one pitch to another, one frequency to another, to determine tuning and scales and modes. So numbers underlie everything in the ancient world, including music. And this goes along with the relationship between music and astronomy. In other words, both are controlled by numerical relationships, right? So the macrocosm of the cosmos, of the galaxy, that macrocosm is guided according to the same numerical principles that the microcosm of a single string vibrating is governed by. The same numerical relationships govern the planets as tuning a single string. And Pythagoras supposedly discovered these relationships when he was walking past a blacksmith's shop, and he heard the blacksmiths banging on different size hammers and anvils. And so when he measured those hammers, he found that hammers were in tune according to certain size relationships. So for an example, if two hammers were going to be tuned 1 octave apart, then their size had to have a 2-to-1 relationship. If they were going to be tuned 1/5 apart, the hammers had to be a 3-to-2 relationship. A 1/4 apart would be a 4-to-3 relationship, and a second would be a 9-to-8 relationship. And that bears out in our tuning today. If I'm going to tune the strings of, well, a piano, then my string for A3 should be exactly twice as long as my string for A4. My string for A3 should be in a 3-2 relationship to my string for E3. Does everybody understand how that works? The sizes correspond exactly to the tuning. Yes, okay. So the way Pythagoras organized these intervals, once he figured out the tuning ratios, the way he organized them was into a diapenthe, which was a perfect fifth, and a diatessaron, which was a perfect fourth. When you put a diapenthe next to a diatessaron, you get a diapason, which is an octave. So these are the intervals that we still know today. We just call them a fifth, a fourth, and an octave. For Pythagoras, they would have been a diapenthe, a diatessaron, and a diapason. Everybody with me there? I know that's a lot of vocabulary words all at once, so if you need me to repeat something, just say so. Okay, if we feel good, let's keep going. So Pythagoras, like I said, is organizing these according to fourths, fifths, and octaves. And he does this on a special instrument that he invents called the monochord. Mono, 1, chord, string. Everyone gets a chord, right? Good, so it's a monochord or a chordotonos, which is a single chord stretched along a piece of wood. And you can see here's a theoretical picture of a monochord with the intervals laid out in a diagram. So we can see the ratios mathematically, and we can see Pythagoras here playing several monochords at once, tuned to different fundamentals, right? So at that point, I don't know if it's a monochord, because now we have more than one chord, but you get the idea. So the next person to transmit this knowledge is a guy named Boethius. He lived from about 480 to 524, so AD, by the way. So this is more recent centuries. So if Pythagoras was in the ancient Greek world, Boethius is living around the time of the decline of the Roman Empire. In fact, his nickname among historians is the last of the Romans. And that is because Boethius has the distinction of being the transmitter of a lot of this ancient Greek theory to us. So Boethius is on the cusp of the ancient and modern worlds, and his writings are where we find the explanation of all this theory. So everyone gets that right. Boethius was not an ancient Greek. He was a Roman from the 5th century AD, so much more recent, but he's the one writing all this stuff down based on classical Greek education. And Boethius divides music into 3 types based on Pythagoras' teaching. So first off, on the scale of the macrocosm, there is musica mundana, or universalis, universal music, the music of the cosmos. These are the numerical relationships guiding planets. So the ancient Greeks, and thus Boethius, would have believed that the distance between planets mirrors the distance between tonal intervals. The stars swirling around the sky would have also mirrored those numeric intervals. The distance between all of these things had to be in harmony. That's why when you hear the harmony of the spheres, if anyone's heard that phrase used before, this is exactly what we're talking about. So that's musica universalis. Then there's also musica humana, the harmony of our own bodies. If all of my organs are working in harmony according to those same numerical relationships, remember, numbers underlie everything in the ancient world. So if all of the organs in my body are working according to those numerical relationships, then I'm a healthy person. If one of them goes slightly out of sync, sickness. So that's musica humana. And finally, the music that we are used to, musica instrumentalis. That's the music that we hear. And music that we can actually make. That's my band. Nice. I like it. See, and that's why history is important to all of us, because then we have these layers of meaning. Perfect. Rachel, you got to send recordings to us so that we can enjoy the harmony of the spheres. Yes, 3 types of music. Everybody with me on those 3 types. Let's talk about the nitty-gritty of intervals then. So, as I said, the ancient Greeks were organizing their music according to fourths, fifths, and octaves, diatessaronds, diapenthes, and diapasons. This guy, Aristoxenus, living in the 4th century BC, so he is ancient Greek. Unlike Boethius, Aristoxenus is living in ancient Greece. And he is a pupil of Aristotle. Now remember what Aristotle believed about music. It's an should be, an educational tool to influence the mind. The ethos of the music should act on our minds properly. So that's the position from which Aristoxenus is approaching all music theory. And what Aristoxenus explains for us is this principle of the tetrachord. Some of you may have heard of a tetrachord before. It's just 4 descending notes. We'll talk about the significance of the tetrachord in later centuries. But right now in the ancient Greek world, just keep in mind it's 4 descending notes. And they are consecutive notes. I can't leap around on an arpeggio. They're scalar. And we can have different types of tetrachords. We call each type of tetrachord a genus, or plural, genera. So genera is just the plural of genus. Genus meaning the type of tetrachord. The first genus of tetrachord is the diatonic one. It goes down a whole step, then another whole step, then a half step. The second genus of tetrachord is the chromatic one, and it goes down 1.5 steps, then a half step, then another half step. The third and final genus of tetrachord is the enharmonic one. This is the one that sounds really freaky to modern ears because it goes down 2 steps, then a quarter step, and then another quarter step. Is everybody with me on those 3 genuses and the intervals that comprise them? Cool. You may, well, never mind. That's fine. Just know those 3 types and know that enharmonic is the one that sounds freakiest to us. We can honestly, because no melody is going to be just 4 notes, right? So we're going to have to stack tetrachords next to each other to comprise melodies. And we can do that in 2 ways. The tetrachords can either be conjunct, and conjunct tetrachords share a pitch. So two adjacent tetrachords share a pitch. If I look at this chart here, then, okay, these first two tetrachords are going to be conjunct because they have a common note, this E. A, G, F, E is my first tetrachord. E, D, C, B is my second tetrachord. Because these two tetrachords both share the pitch E, they are conjunct. Disjunct tetrachords do not share any pitch. So these two tetrachords are disjunct. A, G, F, E is one tetrachord. D, C, B, A is another tetrachord. Two separate tetrachords that do not share any notes and yet are right next to each other. So E and D are next to each other, but no note is shared here. Does everybody understand the difference between a conjunct and a disjunct tetrachord? Okay, any questions on that before going on to the next theoretical concept? Okay, so if I'm going to stack these conjunct and disjunct tetrachords together, what I get is this thing you see in the chart before you called the greater perfect system. This was the big mama of ancient Greek music theory. Just like we have our grand staff today, where we've got a treble and a bass, and we can put anything on those two staves. This is the equivalent in ancient Greece, the greater perfect system. It spans 2 octaves. The open notes are the fixed ends of tetrachords. So like if I have something that's right on the end of a tetrachord, that note would be considered open, right? And the inner notes are movable based on which genus of tetrachord I use. So for our purposes, we've laid them out on our own contemporary music staff, right? The ancient Greeks did not notate music this way. For the ancient Greeks, because they had different genera of tetrachord, these closed notes in the middle could change depending on the genus. So if I'm using an enharmonic tetrachord, these inner notes are going to be different than if I were using a diatonic tetrachord. Does everyone understand what I mean by that? How these open notes are fixed, but the inner notes can vary depending on which tetrachord we use. So that's my spiel on music in the ancient Greek world. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, with the 1 minute that we have left, sorry if my Zoom did not absolutely reek, we would have had more time to philosophize together, but I just want to close by asking you, what is music and what is good music? Does anyone have any strong feelings to share on that as we end up our first class? Yeah, Nathan.
Well, it makes me think back to music in context, which I know a lot of people have also taken, where we were asked this question and sort of came to the conclusion that music is like could technically be any combination of sounds or silences. But I feel like the good music question, I don't know, it's like it almost means nothing because it's so subjective. Like anyone could say something is good or bad. Like it almost has no meaning as a question, if that makes any sense. Like in the sense of like anyone can say something is good if they like it, you know. But
I don't hate me for saying this immediately, but the older I get, the more I start to feel that there is no good and bad music. There was only music with which I agree and disagree. That's a thought that I toy with. But yeah, absolutely. Like it is very subjective.
Like I
And
think there's music that more effort is put into, and there's music that has more theory behind it, and there's music that's written by musicians who have studied more, you know what I mean? Like there's like higher, there's like, you know, there's like higher scholarly music, if that makes sense. But whether it's good or not is like subjective, you know.
I mean, that going off of what you just said, Nathan, by saying that, I mean, respectfully, like a scholar musician can make like the hardest thing in the world, all of the like Bach's, Beethoven's, going even further than that. But then you look at some like pop or whatever from like today or from last week, and sometimes like people that make that kind of music look at like the pop or whatever today, maybe they understand the theory, but they may not initially understand how it comes out. So it's just a variation of different levels, like you were saying, different levels of intensity, but they're both on the same, but just different columns, I think.
Before I throw out a thought on that, I know it's 11, well, 10, sorry, it's my 11:48, your 10:48. If you guys have to slide to a next class, feel free, but I'm gonna hang around and keep talking, and I'll post a recording. So yeah, real quick, John. 100, yes. Studying music does not have to be in the academy, because like Metallica, crazy skilled. I could not begin in my wildest dreams to play any part of any Metallica song. But the musicians who've been around for a while have thought about their craft and worked doggone hard to hone it. I think there's something there. There's some commonality there, no matter what genre you're participating in. That you have. Go ahead. Yeah. Andres, were you going to say something?
No, sorry.
But yeah, no matter what genre you're participating in, that you have that that skill level. Anybody else moved to share an observation? Okay. Well, thank you all for a great first day. I look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday.